Chapter 8, Cycles Without Prophecy. The convergence tempts men to prophecy, but history must be read as rhythm before it is mistaken for timetable. This distinction matters because a crowded hour makes calendars speak. When many pressures gather at once, men begin to count. They count years since the last war, years since the last collapse, years since the last awakening, years since the last schism, reformation, revolution, plague, empire, or fire. They look backward and see strange intervals. They look forward and begin to suspect that a date is waiting for them. The temptation is understandable. It is also dangerous. A man inside ordinary time can afford to be casual about history. He can imagine that events are mostly separate, that progress is the normal condition of things, that yesterday's institutions will continue tomorrow with better software and cleaner language. But a man inside crisis begins to feel pressure from the dead. The old names return. The old fears return. Old arguments become young again. What had seemed settled becomes unsettled. What had been mocked as superstition reappears as hunger. What had been dismissed as reaction becomes memory. What had been buried under procedure begins to knock. Then the crisis-minded man asks, "Have we been here before?" Not exactly, never exactly. That is the first discipline. History does not repeat like a machine stamping identical parts. Rome is not America. The Reformation is not the Internet. The fall of Constantinople is not the rise of artificial intelligence. The year 1000 is not the year 2000, and neither is a secret code for the year 2028. A factory produces repetitions. History produces resemblances. The difference is everything. The shallow skeptic misses the resemblance because he fears superstition. The shallow prophet abuses the resemblance because he wants certainty. One sees no pattern because some patterns have been misused. The other sees one pattern everywhere because he has fallen in love with the relief of explanation. Both are evasions. There are rhythms in history. There are recurrences. There are seasons of confidence and seasons of fatigue. There are ages when institutions still carry the fire that formed them, and ages when the same institutions continue as offices, titles, ceremonies, credentials, endowments, and slogans after the fire has thinned. There are peoples who build with the confidence of founders, peoples who inherit with gratitude, peoples who administer what they no longer understand, and peoples who live among ruins while insisting that the ruins are innovations. There are times when the young are numerous and the future seems obvious. There are times when the old are many and the future becomes a problem to be managed. There are times when belief is thick enough to command sacrifice, and times when belief survives as language used by people who would never bleed for it. There are times when law feels like order, and times when law feels like procedure. There are times when the state appears as guardian, and times when it appears as appetite with a seal. There are times when markets are tools of exchange, and times when they become environments of desire. There are times when images reveal, and times when images replace. These are not dates, they are rhythms. A tide is not a timetable, though tides return. Weather is not clockwork, though pressure has patterns. A fever is not a prophecy, though it has stages. A man can know that winter comes without knowing the shape of every storm. He can know that an old wound aches before rain without claiming command over the sky. History is more like that. Tide, weather, fatigue, memory, recurrence, return. Not clockwork. This is why the language of cycles must be handled with care. It can recover truths the progressive imagination hides. It can also become a narcotic. It can make a man feel initiated when he is only counting. It can make him mistake a chart for wisdom. It can give him the false dignity of being doomed on schedule. Pattern is not prophecy. Rhythm is not prediction. The abuse of cycle thinking does not mean civilizations have no seasons. The existence of seasons does not mean the calendar is a god. There are two opposite errors here, and both need names. The first is flat progress. It says history is a staircase. Whatever comes later is assumed to be more rational, more humane, more developed, and more real because it comes later. It may suffer temporary setbacks, but the direction is settled. Older things are raw material. Newer things are presumptively superior. The future is treated as a moral credential. The second is mechanical doom. It says history is a machine of decline. Once the wheel turns downward, men mostly become spectators. Institutions must hollow, peoples must weaken, late ages must perform their script, and the intelligent man proves his depth by recognizing futility early. The future is not a moral credential here. It is a sentence already passed. Both are evasions. Flat progress lets men avoid memory. Mechanical doom lets men avoid responsibility. Civilizations do age. That sentence is difficult for modern people because our official language prefers systems, incentives, policy, technology, and development. Aging sounds too organic, too poetic, too fatal. It seems to smuggle in a picture of cultures as bodies: birth, youth, maturity, decline, death. The picture can be overdone. A civilization is not literally a man. It can renew itself in ways a body cannot. It can receive a faith, a conquest, a reform, a migration, a catastrophe, a frontier, a saint, a lawgiver, a technology, or a work of genius that alters its course. Still, the analogy bites because exhaustion is real. A civilization can become tired, not tired in every individual. There may be vigorous men in late ages, brilliant artists under decaying regimes, saints in corrupt churches, brave soldiers in dying empires, fertile households in sterile cities, founders in exhausted markets, and children laughing under governments that have forgotten why children matter. Civilizational fatigue does not mean every soul is weak. It means the shared forms no longer easily produce strength. The old disciplines require explanation. The old sacrifices require apology. The old offices require branding. The old authorities require management consultants. The old virtues survive as inspirational language in institutions that reward the opposite. This is fatigue. An age grows tired when it can still operate but no longer knows why it should be obeyed. It can still teach but not form, govern but not command reverence, entertain but not elevate, cure but not reconcile, connect but not bind, administer but not rule, speak but not bless, produce but not beget. Then crisis becomes revelatory. The crisis does not create the fatigue. It exposes it. War exposes whether courage has been preserved or only praised. Inflation exposes whether money was trusted or merely used. Plague exposes whether bodies, families, churches, states, experts, neighbors, and media can still endure fear without dissolving into accusation. A machine that writes exposes whether schools still care about learning. A machine that generates images exposes whether art was still an encounter with beauty or had become content with prestige. A machine that simulates companionship exposes whether human beings had already become lonely enough to accept attention without presence. The event is new. The exposure is old. This is why crisis ages revive old language. Men who laughed at sin rediscover corruption. Men who laughed at providence ask for a benevolent system above politics. Men who laughed at ritual build private liturgies around screens, bodies, brands, parties, and feeds. Men who laughed at demons speak of trauma, addiction, compulsion, incentive, algorithm, contagion, and capture. Men who laughed at idolatry become unable to look away from the glowing thing that asks nothing of them except attention. The old powers return because the human being did not become new. The machine is new. Man is ancient. The cycle frames need to be approached plainly. They are not premises that must be accepted before the argument can proceed. They are not secret keys. They are not membership cards in some initiated school of historical interpretation. They are attempts, some brilliant and some brittle, to give language to recurrence. They are ways men have tried to notice that civilizations tire, generations forget, institutions harden, thresholds gather anxiety, and crisis makes the past feel suddenly unfinished. These frames do not need to be carried in beforehand. That is good. The material should stand in the open, without initiation or hidden shorthand. It should be enough to see the pattern before knowing the names attached to it. living memory fading, institutions surviving their spirit, old religious time returning under secular costumes, long thresholds gathering symbolic pressure, and dates attracting attention because men feel compression before they can explain it. So the following names are instruments, not authorities. This is the point at which cycle frames become useful if they remain subordinate. Spengler, for example, is useful not because he gives us a calendar to obey, but because he forces modern people to consider that cultures may have forms, souls, seasons, and deaths. His danger is aesthetic fatalism, the temptation to admire decline as destiny, to watch the city harden into civilization and call passivity wisdom. He sees something. He must not be allowed to rule. The fourth turning frame is useful not because generations are gears, but because living memory matters. A society that still contains men and women who remember catastrophe in the body behaves differently from one that knows catastrophe through slogans, documentaries, monuments, and school assignments. When the generation that survived a great crisis dies, the restraint purchased by fear and experience begins to fade. Grandchildren inherit institutions built for a danger they did not feel. They may preserve the forms. They do not necessarily preserve the memory that made the forms intelligible. That is not magic. It is memory. The same caution applies to 80-year motifs. Their force is folk historical pressure, not mathematical law. A political order may outlive the fear that founded it. A victory may become inheritance, then entitlement, then exhaustion. The sons of founders may still remember, the grandsons may commemorate, the great-grandsons may treat the whole arrangement as nature, and therefore fail to defend it as achievement. Again, not gears. Memory. The 500-year motif has a different use. Depending how one counts, the pattern phrase almost immediately, which should humble anyone tempted to build a temple on it. Still, the mind notices that great religious, imperial, and civilizational rearrangements often seem to cluster around long thresholds. The birth and death of Christ at the center of history for Christian civilization, the long collapse of Rome, the schisms and conquests that divided Christendom and its neighbors, the Reformation, the printing press, the opening of the New World, the rise of modern science and state power, and now a technological metaphysical convulsion around machine intelligence, generated reality, demographic exhaustion, and spiritual hunger. Is that a code? No. Is it nothing? Also no. It is a pressure point. It tells us where to look, not what must happen. A good cycle frame turns the mind back toward reality with sharper questions. A bad cycle frame turns reality into decoration for the frame. The same must be said of millennial waves. Christian time is not neutral time. A civilization shaped by incarnation, cross, resurrection, church, empire, calendar, saints, schism, apocalypse, and hope does not experience centuries as empty units. Around great thresholds, men often feel the old pressure of ending and beginning. The year 1000 carried its own fears, reforms, violences, expectations, and later exaggerations. The modern mind may overstate the panic of that age, but it should not miss the deeper fact. Human beings living inside sacred history do not experience time as a blank line. Modern secular time pretends to be blank. It is not. It fills with substitutes. Progress becomes eschatology without heaven. Revolution becomes apocalypse without judgment. Markets become providence without God. Technology becomes incarnation without flesh. Utopia becomes kingdom without repentance. Collapse becomes purification without conversion. The calendar never stays empty. This is why dates like 2028 attract attention. It is not because the date possesses mystical authority. It does not. No serious version of the argument can depend on it. The argument must not rise or fall with it. If 2028 passes without the visible drama some expect, nothing essential fails. If it arrives surrounded by crisis, that still will not prove the calendar was a prophet. But the attention to such a date is itself a symptom. Men feel compression. They feel that several clocks, some real and some imagined, are striking near one another. AI acceleration, debt, election cycles, war risk, demographic pressure, institutional distrust, spiritual fatigue, platform power, simulation anxiety, and generational turnover all press on the imagination. The mind reaches for a year because the body feels pressure. The error is not feeling the pressure. The error is surrendering judgment to the year. A date can become an idol for men who no longer know how to read time. The purpose of thinking rhythmically is not to know the day. It is to become sober about the hour. There is an old difference between watchfulness and prediction. Watchfulness sees signs and prepares the soul. Prediction seeks possession of the future. Watchfulness makes a man more responsible. Prediction often makes him less. If he believes the date guarantees catastrophe, he may stop building. If he believes the date guarantees deliverance, he may stop repenting. If he believes history has already written his excuse, he may surrender agency while congratulating himself on realism. Cycles can humble man. They must not paralyze him. A people told that decline is inevitable may begin performing decline with theatrical dignity. A people told that renewal is inevitable may wait for renewal as consumers wait for delivery. A man who thinks history is a machine may treat virtue as irrelevant, courage as ornamental, and prudence as a hobby. Why act if the wheel has already decided? But the wheel has not decided. The wheel is an image. The tide is an image. The weather is an image. Images can teach. They can also rule if men forget they are images. History contains necessity, but not only necessity. It contains structure, but not only structure. It contains accidents, grace, genius, sin, cowardice, courage, fertility, exhaustion, invention, betrayal, repentance, stupidity, discipline, providence, and mystery. A single child can matter. A single cowardice can matter. A single law, book, laboratory, monastery, betrayal, marriage, murder, sermon, or machine can matter. The large rhythm does not abolish the act. Both temptations have to be refused, flat progress and mechanical doom. Flat progress says that technical capability will eventually absorb older problems into management. This is childish. A civilization can become more capable and less wise. It can cure diseases while forgetting what health is for. It can lengthen life while shrinking purpose. It can connect everyone while dissolving communion. It can generate abundance while producing despair. It can automate labor while making men useless to themselves. Mechanical doom says that decline has its script, that men in late ages are mostly spectators, and that courage consists in knowing the futility in beautiful language. This is also childish, though it often dresses better. It turns tragedy into vanity. It lets the intelligent man enjoy despair as proof of depth. The truth is harder. Civilizations have rhythms, and men remain answerable. The convergence must be read this way. AI does not arrive in some random year outside time. It arrives in a late modern civilization already carrying debts, abstractions, broken authorities, generated surfaces, shrinking families, lonely individuals, exhausted ideologies, and systems of control that long predate the model. This gives the moment its charged quality. The machine feels apocalyptic because it unveils not only a possible future, but accumulated past. It reveals what we have become. But it also arrives as a genuine new power. Rhythm does not reduce novelty. The fact that old patterns return does not mean nothing new happens. Gunpowder was new. Printing was new. Oceanic navigation was new. The factory was new. Electricity was new. Nuclear weapons were new. The internet was new. Artificial intelligence is new. Each new thing entered older human patterns and altered them. Each intensified some powers, weakened others, created new classes, destroyed old protections, changed imagination, and forced inherited words to carry unfamiliar weight. The machine is not just another cycle. It is a new instrument inside recurring crisis. That is why cycle language must remain an instrument. It helps us see that crisis does not arrive only from the machine. It helps us see that technical upheaval, spiritual hunger, economic pressure, institutional fatigue, demographic fear, and symbolic confusion have met before in different forms. It helps us see that men under pressure ask for saviors, scapegoats, managers, purges, prophets, emperors, reforms, and gods. It helps us see that weakened institutions often reach for stronger tools. It helps us see that exhausted peoples are tempted by relief. But cycle language cannot tell us whether the machine has a ceiling. It cannot tell us whether superintelligence will cross the threshold. It cannot tell us whether a particular law will hold, whether a particular lab will succeed, whether a particular state will win, whether a particular family will endure, whether a particular people will renew itself, or whether a particular man will become coward or saint. For that, reality must answer, and man must act. This is where recurrence becomes morally useful. It does not give us possession of the future. It strips away the vanity of novelty. It tells modern man, your crisis is not as unprecedented as your machines make you feel. Your temptations have ancestors. Your slogans have older names. Your systems perform functions that older peoples recognized in symbolic form. Your markets demand sacrifice. Your platforms shape attention. Your states seek sight. Your crowds require victims. Your algorithms reward offerings. Your machines answer like oracles. Your managers promise peace through order. Your revolutionaries promise purity through destruction. Your tired souls ask to be governed by something above themselves. The names have changed. The pressures have not. This does not mean the old names should be applied crudely. The old language has to be approached carefully. It is easy to sound occult when the point is actually sober. It is easy to say gods too quickly and lose anyone who knows very well that an app store is not Zeus, that a hedge fund is not Moloch, that an algorithm is not a bronze idol demanding literal incense. Good. The resistance to stupidity is right, but the resistance should not become blindness. When people say the market demands, what kind of speech is that? When they say the algorithm wants, what are they noticing? When an institution ruins a man and everyone inside it claims they merely followed procedure, where did the agency go? When a platform changes a rule and millions alter their speech, what has acted? When a crowd gathers around an accusation and feeds on a victim until the appetite passes, what name should be given to the thing that possessed the crowd? When money, attention, fear, sex, resentment, compassion, safety, and status organize human beings at scale, are we really more rational because we refuse symbolic language? Or have we simply become inarticulate before powers we still obey? This is the deeper use of cycles. They show that powers recur because man recurs. The forms change, the instruments change, the costumes change, the metaphysical explanations change. But human beings remain vulnerable to attention, appetite, fear, imitation, authority, sacrifice, transcendence, envy, loyalty, beauty, panic, memory, and hope. A civilization that forgets this becomes easy to rule by whatever names the powers currently prefer. The old language was not always right. It could become superstition, fear, manipulation, priestcraft, fantasy, or confusion. Modern critique has its place. Not every storm is a god. Not every illness is a demon. Not every market movement is sacrifice in the ancient sense. Not every algorithm is an idol. A recovered symbolic grammar must be ordered, not credulous. But a flattened grammar also lies. It says incentives where men experience temptation. It says systems where men experience domination. It says virality where men experience possession by crowd feeling. It says engagement, where men are being trained in appetite. It says optimization, where sacrifice is being selected. It says content moderation, where speech, memory, reputation, and permission are being governed. It says user behavior, where souls are being formed. It says the model responded, where the lonely heard a voice from above themselves. The older grammar may have been dangerous. The modern grammar is not innocent. The point is not to flee into superstition. It is to recover the capacity to name power at the level at which human beings actually encounter it. A market is a price mechanism, but it is not only that in lived civilization. A state is an institution, but not only that. A crowd is a collection of individuals, but not only that. A platform is infrastructure, but not only that. An algorithm is procedure, but not only that. A machine oracle is software, but not only that once men begin asking it for judgment, comfort, permission, and identity. History's rhythms teach us that man repeatedly builds or receives powers larger than himself, then tries to domesticate them with inadequate names. Sometimes the names are too mythic, sometimes the names are too mechanical. Both errors deform sight. The present age tends toward the mechanical error. It believes that because it can describe a process in technical language, it has exhausted the meaning of the process. It believes that because a system has no face, no temple, no priest, and no statue, it cannot function like a power. It believes that because sacrifice is now distributed through subscription, attention, debt, labor, data, and psychological deformation, sacrifice has disappeared. It has not disappeared. It has become harder to see. The discipline is the point, not a date circled in red, not a wheel that explains away responsibility, not a secret calendar behind the machine, not the thrill of being the sort of person who knows what year the empire falls. Discipline, not prophecy. There are rhythms, there are recurrences. Civilizations tire, institutions hollow, generations forget, old powers return under new names. Crisis compresses time and makes men search for prophecy. But pattern is not prophecy, rhythm is not prediction, cycle is not master, date is not God. The point is not to know the exact hour so that action can be replaced by explanation. The point is to recognize the hour well enough to act inside it without illusion. AI is arriving in such an hour. It may become successor, or it may remain instrument. It may break through the ceiling, or reveal the ceiling by failing to cross it. It may intensify enclosure, or open a frontier. It may become the brightest instrument of exhausted powers, or the tool by which formed men recover agency. The cycles do not decide this for us. They only tell us that the question is old. Men have always lived under powers. They have always named them, feared them, fed them, resisted them, worshipped them, ordered them, misunderstood them, and renamed them. Modernity did not abolish this condition. It only taught itself to speak of powers as though they were merely systems. The next task is to recover sight without surrendering sobriety. Older peoples named recurring pressures differently. Modernity did not abolish those powers. It renamed them.